This is part 3 of chapter 6. Active listening. Okay, the first step is attending. What does that mean? Well, attending is the process, it's a perceptual process of selecting and focusing on specific stimuli. You know, we are bombarded with stimuli all over the place. And when you're attending, you know, this is just this process of selecting and focusing. So how do you do this? First, get ready to listen. Get physically and mentally ready to listen. Try to resist mental distractions. You know, when you hear, something pops into your head, you're worried about the next class, a test coming up, resist that. Do your best to resist that. Make the shift fully from speaker to listener. So if you're having a conversation, you've said what you want to say, you're done as the speaker, then go completely into listener mode. Observe nonverbal cues. Okay? Make sure that you understand all of the messages that the speaker is sending to you. And hear a person out. Wait until they have completed what they're saying before you attempt to think about, encode, and deliver your message. All right, understanding is really just decoding that message accurately so that you get the meaning that the speaker intended. So to help you understand, try to identify the main point. Ask questions to help you understand, and paraphrase. Now, there are two kinds of paraphrases, content paraphrase and feelings. So in a content paraphrase, basically what you do is just restate what the speaker said with the denotative meaning of a statement, so the specific words of the statement. In a feelings paraphrase, you restate the message, but you include the emotional components of what the speaker said. So go to page 110 in your textbook. There, talk more about paraphrasing skills. And to paraphrase effectively, you have to listen very carefully to the message and notice what images and feelings you experience from the message. Determine what the message means to you, and then create a message that conveys these images or feelings back to the speaker. Okay, you want to empathize. So, empathic responsiveness is when you experience an emotional response that is a result of, and it's consistent with, observing another person's display of emotion. Perspective taking is really imagining yourself in the place of someone else. And sympathetic responsiveness is feeling concern or compassion or sorrow for another because of the other person's situation that they're in. So your best friend just lost their dog. Their dog was old, the dog died, they're upset, they're crying. Well, when you're listening, that might be a sympathetic response because you're feeling concern and compassion for your friend who just lost a pet. Okay, active listening. Remembering. All right. So remembering is just being able to retain information and recall it when you need it. So how do you do that? Well, sometimes you have to repeat information, and you might have to say it 2, 3, or 4 times for it to really sink in. Another thing that you can do to help you remember is to construct mnemonics. Mnemonics. That's a technique used as a memory aid. Mnemonics, there was a study back in 1967. Mnemonics really help you increase your recall. He found that students who regularly use mnemonic devices increased test scores up to 77%. So think about lyrics to songs. How many lyrics to songs do you remember? And how did you come to remember them? The same method you use to recall song lyrics can work just as well in school and in academics. Music can be used to help students recall important details to main ideas, and many learners have made songs out of information when a list of items must be learned. So, for example, a music mnemonic. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's a music mnemonic. You learn the ABCs by putting it into that song. The other one, and I don't happen to know this one, but maybe you learned all the states in alphabetical order using the 50 Nifty United States songs. Another mnemonic is a rhyme. So I remember how many days are in each month by 30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31 except February, my dear son. It is 28 and that is fine, but in leap year it has 29. Okay, I'm sure you know this one. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It's a mnemonic to help you remember when Columbus came to America. What about spelling? I before E except after C, or when sounding like A in neighbor and way. Okay, my last mnemonic. To spell Mississippi. I learned it with a rhythm. M, I, crooked letter, I, crooked letter, I, P, P, I. That's how I learned to spell Mississippi. Okay, another thing is a memory palace. This is called the method of Loki or the Roman room, a journey. So Loki is simply the plural for locus, which means place. I think that's Latin. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but I will post some links on how you craft memory palaces to help you take notes, to help you remember. And then finally, another thing to do to help you remember is take notes. So as you're listening to this video, take some notes. When you go back and review them, you will have heard it. You will have written something down. Just the process of writing key words and phrases down helps you remember. And then you go back in and read them again. All those are great ways to help you remember. Okay, evaluating. You want to separate facts from inferences. So go to page 111 in your textbook. So page 111 goes into a little more detail on how you separate facts from inferences. And the other tip to evaluating is probing for information. That's all on page 111 in the textbook. Okay, so read these sentences. Christy got a grade of 96 on the first test. So what can you infer from that? So you might infer that she crammed and she studied all weekend. But to really understand what that means, because all you know is that she got a grade of 96 on the first test. Does she attend class regularly? Does she study for a couple of hours every week? Does she make sure that she reads the textbook before she comes to class? Did she cheat to get a grade of 96? And then the other thing is, what if this was at 96 out of 100 points? Or what if it was 96 out of 200 points? So you can't infer anything other than she got a grade of 96 on the first test. Okay, the second one, Mary's jeans are tight. So one inference might be that Mary's pregnant. But, ask some questions. Could she have gained weight for another reason? Maybe these are really new jeans and they just haven't been stretched out yet. You don't know. All you know is that her jeans are tight. Okay, the next one. Mike was hired by his next door neighbor. Well, you might infer that he was hired only because he knew somebody. Well, before you make that inference, ask some questions. Was he actively searching for a job? Maybe he was looking for 6 months. How did other people find jobs? Was he communicating, responding, and networking effectively? The next one, none of the students who applied from Jeffco got the job. So one inference might be you can't get hired if you went to Jeffco. But let's ask some questions to clarify. How many students actually applied? Were all of the application criteria met? Well, how many applicants applied for the job? Did the job require a master's degree? Okay, the last one. Kids today carry cell phones. So you might infer that kids are growing up too fast. Well, ask some questions. Do you need to be grown up to carry a cell phone? What are the cell phones used for? Do their parents give them the cell phones because the parents are working and want to know where the kids are after school? What percentage of kids today actually carry phones? What's their average age? So you ask questions rather than kind of jump to a conclusion with your first kind of inference. Okay, some response strategies. General guidelines. Provide some feedback cues. Respond only after the speaker has finished talking. And respond to the message before you try to change the subject. Emotional support guidelines. Don't tell someone what they want to hear if it's not true. Look at figure 6.1 in the textbook. For critique response guidelines, demonstrate respect. Take a look at figure 6.2. And then if you're going to give a formal critique, for example, if you're going to do a peer review of another student's persuasive speech, look at figure 6.3. So it has some effective and ineffective critiques examples. And be sure that you use demonstrate respect, use I language and be specific, and you might want to sandwich your critique, meaning that you say something very positive, provide some appropriately worded constructive criticism, and then end it with something positive again. So you put the constructive criticism in between, positive, constructive, positive. All right, now let's talk about how we can be a better listener. First, prepare to listen and ask the person's name with whom you're speaking. You need to be able to refer to them by name. It really helps personalize your encounter and let you get to know somebody. Ask clarifying questions. If you don't understand something, ask questions until you do understand. You can use these in conversations with your friends, in conversations that you have at work, and certainly in class. Ask questions until you understand. Rephrase things to make sure that you've heard them correctly. You might try saying, well, if I heard you correctly, you want me to do 3 things. Or you could say something like, so what I need to do is yada, yada, yada. Is that correct? And then practice civility. If you're confused or you're frustrated, it's really easy to get angry and maybe, become rude. But take a deep breath And remember that if you want the information you need, it's best to avoid anger or outbursts, especially if the person with whom you are speaking is in the best position to help you. And finally, take notes. So, there are many studies that say that we all have problems with forgetfulness. Jotting down names, numbers, addresses, or directions will give you a much better chance of recalling important information, and you will tend to listen better as you initially receive the information. Okay, and this is the end of part 3 for Chapter 6.